Hello, my name is Yolanda Davis. I am a principal software engineer at Cloudera, and today I will demonstrate how we can perform data collection and analytics in the cloud with Apache NiFi, AWS Kinesis, and Lambdas. For my project, I was interested in highlighting an Amazon service that we did not cover in class and demonstrating how that project could be used with open source tools. Based on my background working with data flow and streaming software, I thought that Amazon Kinesis would be a great service to focus on since it supports the collection, processing, and analysis of data in real time in the cloud. But I also wanted to show how simple it is to get data into Kinesis using tools such as Apache NiFi, which supports data routing and transformation. Finally, I wanted to show how Kinesis data can be consumed and analyzed to trigger other services using Lambdas. The goal for my project was to create a Twitter feed pipeline which contains any tweets concerning the Baltimore Ravens, my home team, and send relevant tweets to S3 or to SNS for an alert, depending on the tweet. As shown in the diagram, NiFi does the initial search of tweets and lands them into a dedicated Kinesis stream. From there, two lambdas consume data from that stream. One which searches for any tweets that contain references to Lamar Jackson to save in an S3 bucket, and the other lambda which searches for tweets that reference any mention of COVID to send to an SNS topic that has an email subscriber. Now you might ask, why would we use Apache NiFi for this? One thing to consider is we could have also achieved this using lambdas that consume from Twitter and produce to Kinesis. But NiFi provides an extra benefit in creating a pipeline without code. This is very attractive to companies that may have different departments with varying skill sets, some using applications or writing their own software for data flows, and others that use tooling. Also, NiFi helps to cover a wide variety of use cases with lots of data connectors, even supporting cases such as data transfer between different cloud providers. So with that being said, let's go into the demo. All right, let's take a look at our NiFi flow. Let's actually start at the NiFi pipeline itself, where the NiFi pipeline we typically call a NiFi flow. So NiFi itself is actually running within an EC2 instance. If you notice right here, I have this instance. There is a public IP such that we can nicely show this flow. But NiFi was set up on an EC2 instance and given access to Kinesis stream that we have set up that I'll show later. But basically, just to walk through this NiFi flow is first configured with the ability to pull data or pull tweets from Twitter using a filter endpoint that's available, which basically gets like samples of tweets from Twitter. And we can actually filter on those tweets. So you'll see I have my Ravens filter already in place. So NiFi basically grabs the full tweet payload and puts it on the NiFi connection. Then it sends it to this Jolt transform JSON processor, which basically transforms the incoming payload to only the content of the Twitter payload that we want, which will include the tweet text. And then finally, it takes that transform payload and puts it on the Kinesis stream. Now this processor is already configured to not only look at the tweet stream that we care about, which we'll see in a bit, but it also is configured with the appropriate credentials because I had to take some time and set up a very specific user that had rights to consume or produce to the Kinesis stream that we have set up. And we do that using this AWS credential provider service that's part of NiFi. So as you can see, this guy is running live. That's why you see this play button as green here and the amount of data that it has sent over a period of time. And if we were to go to Amazon Kinesis, we can see here is the active Ravens tweet stream that NiFi is producing messages upon or records upon. And if I were to click into that stream, what's cool about it is we can see the metrics associated with it. This is great to not only see the amount of data that you might have put onto a particular stream, but also to see how many records have been retrieved from the stream. It's also really useful when you're trying to do a lot of troubleshooting, which I've done in setting up this project. So now let's take a look at the lambdas that are consumers of the stream. So remember, the first lambda that we have is the one that looks at those tweets to see whether or not they have any information on Lamar Jackson, and if so, we want to save those tweets to S3. Couple of things to notice here. The first is the designer itself, so it allows us to kind of click on a certain area, whether it's our code area, which we'll get to in a bit, or also to see the Kinesis trigger. So the trigger basically is associated with our stream itself, and it allows our Lambda to be directly connected or to be triggered once any records land onto that stream. So if I select on the actual Lambda itself, you'll see its runtime is Node.js. Actually, let me scroll down just a little bit so you can see that runtime. So this runtime is based on Node.js. So there's a lot of libraries that Node.js helps to provide behind the scenes. And that way our code can only needs to focus on implementing the handler section, which you see here. And what's cool about it is we can easily import AWS SDK such that we can access the S3 API and send any payload data that we want or objects that we want to S3. So in this particular instance, you notice that we are looking at our tweet text that's in the payload, and we're trying to see if it has Lamar and Ravens in it. And if so, it'll save that payload to the S3. We use environment variables. So if you notice, I don't have the specific bucket defined in the code itself, but that's defined a little bit later on as an environment variable, and helps to make it a bit more flexible. So for this particular Ravens tweet Lambda, we'll notice that these land in our S3 bucket. I have an S3 bucket. Let's see, let me scroll all the way up. Notice it's really, really busy, but this Ravens tweets is our bucket. We have a prefix of daily tweets. And then we notice we have all the individual tweets landing here. So in similar form, we also had the Lambda that will send us an email notification if we see any incidents of COVID in that tweet. So if you notice, we have basically the same structure where we'll have a Lambda and then a Kinesis trigger already set up for us, looking at the same tweet stream. And we have our code in place. This code is also in Node.js, but in this particular instance, we're using the SNS API. So as we're looking to filter or find those tweets that we care to send an email message on, we'll have a particular SNS topic that we want to send our messages to or our tweets to with a particular subject line. And notice again, we're using an environment variable. In our particular case, this environment variable points to a predefined topic using its resource name. So our topic configured over here also has an email subscriber. So basically every time we match that particular case that we're checking for, so if it's COVID and if it has Ravens in the tweet, we'll get that email message that comes in. Thankfully, I'm not inundated with email messages like I was a couple of weeks ago with the Ravens having a lot of incidents of COVID, but I did get one that came through today. And as you can see, here's how the email message lands. So with that being said, here's a couple of other things or things to think about on how you can really apply this. I know I love the Baltimore Ravens, but in a real world, we want to think about things or other ways that we can use this type of integration. So remember I mentioned earlier, cloud to cloud data transfer. One of the cool things about NiFi is it has a lot of different data connectors, some for Azure, some for Google Cloud or Google Cloud Platform, et cetera. And you might have a use case where you need to transfer from one cloud provider to the next. Perhaps you're transferring from Azure and you want to get things into Amazon and you already have some downstream services. You could use NiFi to fill that particular gap. Also, what if you wanted to do some intelligent alerting? We're doing some very basic alerting now, but what if we wanted to do some windowing to see how many tweets that you got that had Lamar Jackson or had references of COVID within a 5-minute window or within a certain period of time? You could use Lambdas to be a bit more sophisticated to do that type of query checking and then send your notification. We could even be more sophisticated in evaluating those tweets in Lambdas and seeing if, checking the sentiment of those tweets. And then finally, maybe we wanted to train some models that we have downstream. If you're using some of the machine learning services or Amazon forecasting, Lambdas can be used to send down to those models and further trained in order to support prediction. So I'm out of time, but I appreciate you for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or to reach out to me on any of the platforms, Twitter, IG, or LinkedIn. Thank you so much again for watching this presentation.